This is the Almost Daily Zencast. Hello, and Namaste. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I am your humble host, the Incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let's get started. Hello and welcome, my fellow human beings. I am your humble host, the Incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, here to remind you, dear listener, that we have always been each other. Namaste. Before I read the show's mission statement, I'd like to explain why I'm dropping that in right now, where I think I've covered it in other episodes. As I recently had the pleasure of announcing, the show is now available on Spotify. So there's going to be a bunch of new listeners tuning in, and I wanted this to be an episode they see right away. So, welcome to everybody who's new to the show. Hang on. It's a wild and spirally ride. Forgive the current condition of the show. It is like a rough draft. Imagine as though all the episodes that are up are like you tuned in to listen to me do a warm-up dress rehearsal. Right? And now I'm going to revamp them and redo them and repackage them and represent them. Kind of. Sort of. It's weird. Whatever. People love it. People hate it. Eventually, I'll figure out a formula and maybe get in some collaborators and a co-host or three, and it'll go viral. That's the plan. Here we go. Regardless of how long it takes before that happens, this has been, from the inception of the concept of the show, and shall be, hopefully for however long the show goes on, the mission statement of the show. Mission statement may or may not be the right phrase. This is like the guiding thesis, which opens with the statement I greeted you with today. We have always been each other. Namaste. All-inclusive, species-wide, pineal gland activating, third eye opening, transcendent enlightenment is our natural and organic birthright. Despite the fact that the human species has been enslaved by the perpetual war profiteers for centuries, despite the fact that we live under that oppression now, peace is possible. Self-liberation from all ideological constructs through meditation in order to trigger global tipping point enlightenment. That, it is proposed, might be the solution. In other words, if we heal ourselves and we heal each other, we will also heal our enemies. Sending you peace, love, and grooviness. Namaste. This is the Incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And that was the Almost Daily Zencast mission statement. Now, some people may think it novel to call me crazy at this point in time. Yes, thank you for chiming in. For those of you who feel that impulse, trust me, you are not the first. I very highly doubt that you will be the last. But I've spent a lot of time, my life, a lot of time of contemplating and investigating and questioning and doubting and trying to find some reasonable, rational way to confirm or deny or otherwise verify these ideas before I came to the point of presenting them to you as such. And as this is like a talk show podcast, I'm not here to explain anything other than my opinion about what seems to be going on in the world. I'm not here to complain. I guess I do complain. I'm not here to pretend to be some ultimate authority in anything. But I do stand by this statement. And contrary to some people's popular belief, I'm not here to argue about this with anybody. I don't want to argue. I want to share with you all the reasons why I think this statement is correct. And that's the driving thrust of this podcast. I'm not here to argue and tell other people that they're wrong. In fact, my overarching meta theory of the universe incorporates a mechanism that I think really carefully tries to explain how it is that belief might actually be functioning in our world versus trying to debate between belief systems and determine which one is the best or the most accurate or the most righteous, right? Like, I don't try to do that. I don't get into belief system comparison, except in that I am fascinated by some of the really bizarre things they have in common. But I'm not here to judge anybody or any construct. I am here to encourage. And mind you, I do it with humility and love, right? Like a playwright writing an interesting, bizarre, challenging play that throws lots of crazy ideas around, makes people get edgy and upset, but for the purposes of thinking and questioning through those crazy, edgy ideas, not to take them blanket and blindly, into blind faith, but to process them and consider them. So the hope is that this show, as a sort of talk show opinion, variety-esque type thing, can grow into something that rivals that can rival and even compete with the demagogues of the media echo chambers. Why? Here's part of my thesis that maybe I haven't brought to the forefront clearly yet. I think that we have to thread the needle between the extremes of, like, if these two extremes create a tiny needle to thread, the extremes of tearing everything down, bloody revolution style, which some people seem to be chomping at the bit for, which is disturbing to say the least, and the apathy that lets the status quo roll over us and pave over Mother Earth and slowly provide for us creature comforts that guarantee species-wide self-destruction. I think somewhere in the middle between those extremes, there is a call to participate in the worldly labor of organization as opposed to politics, right? Like, we must organize. We must organize the people. We must organize the people and the communities they live in. We must organize the people and the communities they live in regionally in a way that logistically makes sense and builds relationships between regionalities so that, culture and communities and that which we define as economy may thrive. But we can do it the sort of blind sheep. No offense, guys, I'm not calling anybody in particular sheeple here, because we were all raised to be sheeple. Calling other people the sheeple doesn't help much if you don't understand you were also programmed to be the sheeple. And no matter how self-aware you think you are, there's always more layers. Not to sound elitist. I'm not claiming anything other than going, hey, wow, there's a lot of craziness going on, and we need to continue to increase our awareness of the systems around us. So, okay, let's chit-chat for a hot second about this mission statement. What the fuck is he talking about, right? People ask that. People ask me that all the time. The fuck are you talking about, man? Why do I make funny voices? I'm not making fun of anybody in particular. I just make funny voices. I'm a funny voice person. I'm one of those people that always made funny voices, regardless of the situation. So, don't read too much into it. In fact, there's a part of me that wishes I had developed an entire character, funny voice, persona for this show. And I guess to some degree I may be kind of absent-mindedly doing that, but I didn't really design anything for it. But that is neither here nor there. What the hell's he talking about, son? Host of an underground podcast. What does that mean? Hardly anybody listens to it, but the people that are listening to it are listening to it. And the people that are listening to it around the world. So, welcome to a small, weird network of people that are curious about some of the same things. Now, I'm no elitist, and I'm no, authoritarian either. I don't pretend to know any better than others. But there is, for those of you who are listening to these words, and who may not know, there is, and has been for quite some time, a growing collection of communities, because there's always a diversity of expression, right? A growing collection of communities that are particularly interested in investigating the powers of spiritual teachings and how one or groups of people or communities may apply those pragmatically in our normal everyday world. I tried to craft that sentence to always sort of sound as centrist as possible and not sound too crazy or extreme in either direction. The world is a wild and crazy place, and the collection of theories, ideas, opinions, and models that trend into various levels of common popular acceptance about what is or is not going on in the world are all fascinating and interesting. And some contain ingredients of accuracy to higher degrees than others, and some are wildly implausible and highly unlikely to be the one that explains everything. The human species has asked itself the question, or it may seem with a bit of hindsightery as we look back through what appears to be a somewhat accurate but maybe wildly inaccurate record of our time here on this lush and once vibrant environment, whatever shape it may be, we can project a lot of inferred or completely made up ideas onto our past and how we developed and how we got here. But what I find to be a very useful and interesting dividing line, a rubric of sort of separating the chaff from the wheat, as it were, has to do with organic, natural, like phenomenological. It exists in reality. It's not just some extrapolated conceptual model kind of boundary. Like, does it exist in nature? Can it be encountered with the human apparatus, which has its limits? I talk about that in episodes both recently and way far back. But people are more likely to rally behind something, a movement, let's say, that is deeply rooted in the reality that they themselves as individuals can experience, right? We see this in politics when politicians make broad, platitude-based promises that then they technically deliver on, but that don't seem to impact the individuals in their experience of living their day-to-day life. Voters get discontent with their political choices. It's easy to dismiss religion because so much of the content of religious text seems, on the surface, and at a first glance, sort of, especially if you're trying to take a literalist view, seems so unlikely to occur in the reality that we all can commonly connect to. The question is, are we reading those texts accurately? Are the interpretations we are being offered even, fundamentally investigating the right avenues? Are they based on the right assumptions? Et cetera, et cetera. Question everything. The reason that I use the word organic in my thesis statement here that drives my whole entire madness is because I humbly propose to you that instead of arguing about this dogma or that dogma, this ideology or that ideology, that nature itself will verify itself, even those things about nature that are so rare or so rarefied that we commonly don't experience them, right? Because they are still there. They are still part of nature. They may be extremely rare or hard to find or hard to perceive, or they may exist at a level of activity that is currently not accessible by our perceptual apparatus, right? Like, it is an established scientific fact that if you took 100% of the available, measurable activity of the universe, 99% of all that phenomena falls outside of the 1% range that is directly perceivable by the human apparatus through the, senses we're commonly familiar with. We can't see X-rays, right? But we know X-rays do stuff, and we get X-ray imagery so we can diagnose, from the most obvious examples of, fractures in bones, et cetera, et cetera. We don't see the waves being emitted by the sonogram, we don't see any stuff flying back and forth from our phone device to all the different networky things that it plugs and talks to, via Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc., etc. But there they are, fully functional and happening. I can send a file from my computer from this device to that device to that device to around the world, without seeing the means by which, or I can't hear it either, right? Etc. That is not just true of our own technology that we've invented, that's true of the universe. And why do I harp on that point so much? For those of you who've been listening along, you've heard me reference this at least, a few times. It's significant because it should be humbling to the human individual. In a good way. It should humble us in a really good way and remind us to reconnect to and reinvestigate and re-explore and refamiliarize ourselves with the ways in which we can perceive and interact the cosmos in these living meat puppet avatar things, movie cameras for God, etc. And it should also remind us that the vast majority of the problems we created for ourselves are silly and ridiculous when compared to this phenomenal fact, and that arguing about ideas that are limited to these very severely shuttered down perceptual limitations that we're talking about here, these ideas are themselves then severely limited, and then conversely, when we use them or cling to them, limiting to ourselves and each other ideas. Why would we cling to severely limited and limiting ideas that do not take into account the 98% of the universe that we can't see or hear or touch or taste or smell? Why wouldn't we set aside these severely small and shallow and incomplete and wholly inaccurate sets of ideological models and pursue a much broader comprehension at a popular level, at a trending level, at a everybody involved level of the rest of this phenomena that we don't understand, so that we may form much larger, more whole, more advanced, more powerful ideas that maybe really truly can solve the really tiny and ridiculous and limited and limiting problems that our ideological constructs create for us. Is that too much to ask, folks? Comment, click, share, discuss. That's what the show's about. And in a really double-down effort to keep the show snappier, tighter, more focused, and in more easy-to-consume segments, I'm going to wrap it up right here at just 25 minutes instead of the usual almost an hour. Thank you, as always, for all you long-term listeners. Thank you for tuning in and downloading. Thank you, all you new listeners, for tuning in and downloading and sharing and liking and no one does really, but I say thanks anyways, because the crazy mystics claim that if you believe deep down with gratitude, with real, true, genuine gratitude, that and are grateful for that which you, instead of chasing after that which you desire, then it will organically flow instead of run away from you as you chase it, or something like that. Regardless, if you're listening, I say thank you to you. And I encourage you, as always, to give your feedback and ask your questions and let me know how crazy you think my theory is. And if you don't think it's crazy, if you're out there tuning in and you're like, hey, man, I don't think you're crazy, you might ramble like a mad person, but your theory is interesting and doesn't sound impossible, then let's talk about that and get some chit-chat going there. Because I think, like I say in other episodes, the more people help each other explore this idea, the more people will be drawn to the idea to even begin exploring it. And that's that we can save the world by healing each other instead of going to war to stop the war, right? Nice. You all know what I'm talking about. Peace out. Tune in for more shows. Going to be doing a bunch of new things. Yeah. A little announcement. I'm going to be testing out a show that I might spin off into its own separate show. And it's something I've just sort of silly and weird and want to do. And that's a sort of fan fiction podcast set in the universe of a video game that I like to play. Yeah, I'm a crazy spiritual mystic, but you know what? I still like to entertain myself when I'm not busy doing quote-unquote work. And that includes my spiritual work. I don't, but whatever. Judge me, don't judge me, I don't care. Stay tuned. I'm gonna maybe tinker with teasing out a sort of trial episode of Flights of Fancy, the Eve MMO podcast, talk show, fan fiction, mashup. I don't know what it is. It's a weird thing. But it might be interesting. I don't know. Maybe you guys think I'm boring as hell. Who knows? Tune in for more. And that is what I've got to say about that. As always, thank you kindly for listening. This has been the Almost Daily Zencast with your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Until next time, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart.